Okay, welcome to our Eid of Shabbat, Parashat. Parashat Lech Lecha. Our question is membership. What are its rewards and benefits? And what are its costs? In our parasha, we meet Abraham Abinu. We have a lot of powerful, memorable, well-known episodes, dramatic episodes. But we have in our parasha a berit. We have a covenant. In fact, we have more than one. A berit is a pact. Often it's made between peoples. We have all three of our forefathers, our avot, who had pacts with various kings. Abimelech and Yaakov had it with Laban. Later in history, we see David with Natan. And then there are national pacts made between God and his nation. And there were several made in the subsequent sefarim and episodes and later historical events in our history. But there is a pact, a covenant, an agreement, a commitment that is, in certain respects, far more powerful than any other in our history, in Jewish history, in world history. And that's one known as the Berit Ben HaBetarim, and I'll tell you why. Later in our parasha, there's a physical commitment to Hashem in our Mizvah Berit Milah of circumcising the foreskin. We have famous Beritot in Parashat. Later on, Parashat Yitro is called the Berit Behorev, the Ma'amad Har Sinai, Parashat Yitro Mishpatim, the revelation of Mount Sinai. That was short-lived because of our faults, because of Het HaEgel, because of our behavior. That berit did not hold, so to speak, did not disappear, but it was not something that could have survived on its own. And because of that, there was a subsequent follow-up, secondary covenant between Hashem and Am Yisrael called the Berit Ba'arbot Moab, which was consecrated later in the book of Devarim at the end of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, the 40th year of the desert. And that was the more long-lasting historical covenant understanding between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even that, half of that berit was kilalot, the other half was berachot. Half of that understanding and commitment of Hashem to us was that I also commit to the fact that there's consequences to your actions. And these are the various punishments and difficulties that your nation will endure if you don't observe and aren't committed to me. So part and parcel of that berit, of that covenant, within the guarantee, ironically, is something of a non-commitment or a commitment to mete out justice on Am Yisrael. And that is part of the reason why we've had such a difficult history. There is only one pact with Am Yisrael that is unconditional, that is unwavering, that is permanent, that is not based on any actions of ours, that can't fluctuate. And that is the first one made in the history of our nation to a single individual. An individual who became the father of our nation, but who represented his descendants for generations to come up till modern day and going forth to the future in times of redemption. The individual is Abraham Abinu, who we met in our parasha, well, actually the end of last week's, who we met in a grand way in our parasha, and he became the chosen person. And the covenant, as I mentioned, is known as the Berit Ben HaBetarim. Betarim, as we'll be introduced to as we read in a moment, means segments, pieces, parts, and it really ends up being parts of animals. It's a funny title. As we read through this, we'll see that there's more questions than answers. And there is difficult terminologies. And there is a certain fragmented and disjointed and non-flowing reading of the text. But we will read. We will, as we go along, pick up some of the nuances and difficulties and use them to help us with possible in-depth understandings of this great berit, this great covenant between Hashem and Am Yisrael. So We are, if you're following, in Parashat Lech Lecha, Perek Tedvav, chapter 15. It begins in Pasuk Zayin, verse 7. And it's only a handful of Pasukim, of which we'll read most, but it goes through, technically, through the end of the Perek, which is through Pasuk Kaf Aleph. So let's read, and we'll ask as we go. So this is post the war of the 4 versus 5 kings, and Abraham Avinu saving Lot. And this is post a brief conversation that Hashem would have with Abraham subsequent to that war. We promised him that he'll have a natural child. And here it is. Vayomer elav, ani Adonai asher hositicha me'ur kasdim latel lecha ta'aretz hazol l'rishta. I am God. I'm the one who took you out of your birthplace to give you this land that you stand on, which is Eretz Yisrael, to inherit. Vayomar Adonai Elohim bama eda ki irashena. He asked the faithful question, does Abraham to Hashem, my God, with what? How will I know that I will inherit it, that it will become mine in a permanent manner? And within this question is all types of questions that it triggers from us. There are midrashim all over the map, some which look at this pasuk as a fault to Avraham Avinu, questioning, challenging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking for some type of proof or guarantee. Because of this, some say the actual first difficult exile was caused. Hard to imagine that Avraham Avinu, the great person who earned this promise, is the one that actually caused the subsequent generations of suffering. There is such a midrash. There's another one on the other part of the spectrum that compliments Avraham Hashem, called Hashem, Hashem Elohim, Amonai Elohim. First time that description was used to God. And Avraham Avinu, with his great way of recognizing Hashem like no one else. There are midrashim that speak of Avraham just asking with his prophetic vision of a future destruction of the temple and a lack of korbanot, of the animal sacrifices. Can we please have a replacement for them? Something in the future that can atone for my descendants' sins? All of that, A to Z and everything in between, are packed into this comment and this question of Avraham Avinu. Some looked at positively by Hachamim and some with negative perspectives. What is indeed the question? Let's move on. Vayomer elav, there's a response to the question. You want to know with what? I'll tell you with what. Or with some type of substance of guarantee. Seems like Hashem was responding to Abraham and telling him, there will be a physical intermediary with which we can consecrate this pact, this agreement between me and you. I ask you to take an agla, which is a young calf, meshuleshet, an ayaz, a goat, meshuleshet, an ayil, a ram that's an older sheep, meshulash, the tod v'chozal, and 2 types of birds. There are different commentaries on this. Some say meshuleshet means take 3 of each species. Mm-hmm. Some say it's referring to the age. It should be a 3-year-old of each. What do we know about the pattern here? About why these are the chosen animals with which to consecrate this pact? Some say these definitely represent, and they do, the future species of optional korbanot to come to Am Yisrael. It can come from a cow species of bakar, from a goat family, or from the sheep family, tor and gozal, torim or sheneh b'nei yonah, of the 2 types of bird offerings. So these represent future types of korbanot. Take them, whatever they are, says Hashem to Abraham. So Abraham listened. He took them and he split them into halves. Now, who told him to do that? Who actually split them? Well, is it Abraham? Seems like, according to the simple reading, some say God split them. There was no command prior for Abraham to split them. And he put each segment, seemingly the animals are split now. both the calves and the goat and the sheep, the ram, and each piece is now facing Re'ehu, its fellow piece. They're in half, and yet they're next to each other. The two bird species were not broken in half. Well, was that part of the deal? And why not? What do some represent? There are theories, and we'll get to them, that there's all type of symbolic representation of these animals. Okay, let's move forward. What's the eye? It's a type of bird. It came down and hovered over, some say it's a vulture, on these pigarim, on these segments of meat. They're now animals that are broken in half. Abraham shooed them away. A single vulture came down, but he shooed them away. What significance does that have? It seems like a by the way statement that is brought as a side note in here, not part of the actual ceremony. It is as if it wasn't supposed to happen. What's this mosquito doing over here, right? The sun starts going down, and he starts to get sleepy. Did Abraham fall asleep in the middle of the most important covenant in Jewish history? I don't think so. Tardemah perhaps represents sometimes prophetic vision fell upon him. As Rambam says, the other prophets besides Moshe only prophesied in a state of semi-consciousness, of sleep at night. And as that happened, an awesome, massive darkness falls upon Abraham. What is that talking about? Is that physical? Is that mental? Is that symbolic? And he tells Abraham the famous words that we know. We read it on our Seder table year after year. You should know and have no doubt that there will be a nation that oppresses your nation who will be strangers in that land. He doesn't identify who it is, but a land not theirs. They will enslave them. They will oppress them. They will suffer for 400 years. We know that subsequently in later years to be Misraim and the servitude in Egypt, which was 210 years, but 400 is a long discussion, perhaps from the birth of Yitzhak Avinu. And but I will take them to task. There will be retribution and justice to the nation who oppressed and enslaved. And your nation will then, your people, your children, descendants, will then leave with great wealth. There'll be a redemption. Goes on to say that you, however, will not experience this in your life. You will live a peaceful life, so to speak, relatively. And the fourth generation will return here to this land because the sin of the Emori, which was the inhabitant of the land, those people, is not yet complete. I'm not ready to kick them out. Pasuk Yud Zayin says, the sun was coming or going down, and there was an event, you can say, there was an acceptance. And all of a sudden, seems like a miraculous fire. It's a pillar of fire, a heat of an oven came and passed through these pieces of meat and these animals. And it says, and that day, that moment, historic time in our history, Hashem consecrated that covenant with him, saying, this land is your children. He gave them the boundaries. He named 10 nations that they will inherit and conquer in order to take this land that was bequeathed to them and be able to acquire it on their own. That's the Beri. As I said, where can we possibly start to attack this? So instead of going through a long analysis, which would take hours, we would not exhaust the different possibilities. Let's just talk about what we do know. And perhaps from that, we can understand how fortunate and lucky we are to be able to be standing on the shoulders of our forefather and of this great pact and commitment of Hashem to us. What we do know is that he promised them the land. And Abraham Abinu, our father, wanted something more. What we do know that Abraham Avinu yearned and wanted this land so much that he asked for a backup, for a guarantee. What we know is that Avraham Avinu was fearful of the possible loss of this pact and of the faults, through the faults of his own or any of his descendants, the conditional nature of this covenant. What we do know is that he wanted this to be a surviving pact above and beyond any of the errors in the future of his nation and make sure it was kept whole at all times. What we do know is that he was concerned about our future and how, despite having a land of our own, losing that land, losing the merits, losing the uniqueness, losing the temple and the presence of God on that land. And therefore, he challenged, but he requested, he beckoned for more of a guarantee, for an unconditional, unquestionable pact between him and Hashem and his future nation. What we know is that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave a formula. He provided the ingredients, this esoteric, this ambiguous, this mysterious type of input into this pact, cut, sliced animals. Some say the three animals stood for our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov. There are proofs based on the way in each one of their lives there are episodes with Abraham, a bakar, and with Isaac, an ayil, and with Yaakov, an ez, a goat, in their lives. Some say they represent our three great soldiers throughout our sojourn in the desert, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam, the siblings. There's reason to believe that those animals represent them. Some say that the three animals, quite to the contrary, represent the nations of the world and our enemy empires who oppressed us throughout history. And the Tor V'Gozal represents like the dove does, Am Yisrael. And the enemies were cut in half. And the birds, which is us, the future nation of redemption, was not. What we do know is that a mysterious vulture, perhaps, came down out of nowhere and he was shooed away. Something that seemingly showed an untimeliness, a non-readiness, an inappropriateness of that bird. It doesn't belong in the story. Midrashim abound. The one that I love is that perhaps it was Mashiach ben David that came to redeem us. I'll save you, says our Messiah. And said Abraham, or perhaps Hashem, shoo away. It's not time for you yet. The time will come. There's no premature redemption. What we know is that he prophesied. And there was great fear. The fear was because of great vision that was offered to him about the future. Based on several midrashim, we understand that these faithful words, Ema hashecha gedola nofelet alav, an awesome, massive fear fell upon him, perhaps represent the future empires to oppress us and to persecute us. And as the Midrash tells us, Ema, Bavel, Hashecha, Paras, the Persian Empire, Gedolah, Yavan, the Greek Empire, Nofelet alav, is the Edom, or perhaps the Roman and future extensions of it, empire, all the way to the present. What we know is that Abraham Avinu felt, saw, envisioned the suffering of his children. And he felt that darkness. It was massive. It was indescribable. He was shown everything there is to know about the difficulties endured. You want the land, there will be self-sacrifice to earn the land. You want to know by ma'edah, I will guarantee, I'm willing to commit permanently. But in order to earn it, no pain, no gain. And they will go through the greatest, most undescribable difficulties. And he saw destruction. He saw crusades. He saw expulsions. He saw inquisitions. He saw holocausts. He saw pogroms. He saw it all. And it was so much at the end that the Ramban says, Nofelet alav, it was crashing down upon him like an insurmountable weight. And yet, it ends off, and what we do know, with a guarantee. Yeshuvu hena. From you, 4 generations, they'll come back for the first time. But in a symbolic way, they'll eventually come back permanently. What we do know is that there will be payment, there will be accountability, dan anochi, and there will be justice in the end. And everyone pays the piper, and God will take the task and offer retribution to all who deserve. And we know when the dust settles, they will come back, b'shalom, b'seba tova. And your children in the end will inherit this land, because Abraham, I commit to you. And here it is, exactly what you asked for. The guarantee, the pact, the covenant for the ages, unconditional. One which will remain whole and intact forever. There's a lot that we'll have to go through to get there. But this beri, based on your request, Abraham Avinu, will never end, will never stop. We sing, Vehisha Amda La'avotenu Velanu. It's because of this berit that we know that we've prevailed and persevered through it all. Because of this first agreement and pact we had as a nation with God, our Father and the following descendants, that we can feel comfortable and satisfied and assured that the final promise and the first promise will come to an end soon in our days with full redemption. Amen. 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 Shabbat shalom.
22 minutes, Rabbi.